Podcaster turns to ChatGPT in an effort to discover another way to talk about Declan Rice while we await his signing. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, the Blackman Twitter Ink. Hello, everybody. So today's Declan Rice conversation is going to be... No, I'm kidding. This is the funny thing. Someone reached out on Discord and they're like, oh, you're going to be scared to hit that publish button today, aren't you? They're going to announce Rice. And I was like, yeah. But then I was like, well, what's left to say? Literally the only thing left to say is Declan Rice has been announced as an Arsenal player. It has been absolutely covered to death. And you know what? Urian Timber has as well, for that matter. So there's no need to talk about that stuff. I think one of the things we can talk about today that might be interesting, and to be clear, there's not much to talk about today that might be interesting, he says, hoping you'll listen to the podcast. You've already started it, so I think from a metric standpoint, we're fine. You're good. You're free to go. I want to talk a little bit about preseason and what we want to see in preseason and what the unanswered questions are for preseason, because we've played a behind closed doors game, 1-1, disgraceful, taking the pride out of it, Mikel, against Watford. We have a Nuremberg game coming up this week, and then it's off to America. He says from America, but, off to America for the club. And it'll be interesting to see what everybody's sense is of what the preseason is going to deliver for us. I mean, last summer, I think preseason was a big reason why I believed something special could happen that season. There was just a change, a big lurch forward that you could tell from the formation, from the way players were being used, from the quality of our attack. And I'm curious to see what this preseason holds for us. So we will touch on that. We might touch on some departures behind the scenes, Steve Round, Gary O'Driscoll. There's one or two bits and pieces. Of course, we can talk about Matty Turner stopping penalties, Arsenal goalkeeper and penalty stopping, shocker, and see what people think about that. And that should give us a podcast. So I think we're going to be okay. I think it's going to be a reasonable Monday. And thank you for hanging with us. One last thing to note, we did our first office hours session in Discord of our Patreon. I had a hell of a lot of fun doing it. I want to thank the patrons because, as you can imagine, the first one, there were some technical challenges. We got through it together. We figured out why. And now we are all set up to do it. What it basically is a big room where everyone can hang out. And in this instance, I chatted to a bunch of different patrons, one at a time, not like a whole big mass of nonsense. And people were able to take me up on my terrible opinions. We could talk about why and wherefore and some gossip and things like that. We'll be doing that again with Clive and Tim and Paul and fewer technical disruptions. So thanks to the people who got through it with us. I know sometimes getting into the Discord once you sign up is a thing that you have to figure out. It's actually quite easy. And if you need help with that, you can always email me. So enough of that. Paul is on Twitter at @PosInMyPants. Hello, Pos.
Woohoo! This whole thing about people showing up, listening to you say there's nothing to talk about, but you thinking they won't leave is a bit like that party you went to where you went along thinking it was going to be fun, and when you got there, there was really nobody there, and the people who were there weren't very exciting, and you left at the earliest moment you possibly could. So, yeah.
The joke's on you, I've not been to a party.
Okay. In a long time. My one gambit is preseason is the real season, and I'm going to use this podcast to try and persuade Tim that he loves preseason and it's meaningful.
Good. Well, as long as we have something to do on this podcast, I think we'll all be fine. Tim's on Twitter at Stillmanator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there. Anything
new in your world?
No, not a lot. Had a good weekend. Saw Blur yesterday at Wembley. That was really good. So yeah, just had a weekend where I went outside, and it turns out there's a world out there, and there's this big yellow thing in the sky, which can be quite nice. So,
but did you touch grass? The kids tell me that's a thing you're supposed to do.
Well, no, because the whole Wembley pitch was covered, so I wasn't able to, unfortunately. So maybe that's one for the coming weekend.
Okay, something to think about. You'll be able to touch grass at a future point in time. All right, so let's look. Gary O'Driscoll, well regarded, does medical stuff. Medicine's important. We all want to be alive and thriving in our physical form. We want our players to do the same. He's moved on to United. It's a shame. He's highly regarded. We'll get someone else in. By and large, I think that's going to be fine. The Steve Round thing, maybe slightly more meat on the bone there to discuss that. Let's get that one out of the way, and then we can move on to the rest of the nonsense. Tim, do you have a sense of what, if any, impact this can have? I mean, it's hard to know, what the seconds and thirds at clubs do and what their role is. What I do know is that Alex Ferguson, for example, every few seasons he would refresh, right, the the assistant coaches and the people that worked with him, I think, to bring in a new perspective, create a new dynamic. And for whatever reason we're doing this, I think it can be helpful for a coach to have a different voice in his ear, providing him a slightly different look, a different perspective, because I think the manager is going to have strong, clear ideas about football, about the squad, about the talent, about the situational awareness of what's happening on the pitch in any given game. Refreshing the voices that give him different views and perspectives can be valuable. So do you have any takes in this thriving take economy on the Steve Round departure?
Yeah, the thing is, it would be really, because I think they described it as a mutual decision, and clearly sometimes it's genuinely a mutual decision. Sometimes it's a mutual decision.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting.
It was a good idea after we sacked you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we talked about it, we sacked you, and you decided that was a good idea, and we paid you off. Yeah. Not suggesting that's what's happened here, but it would be interesting, because we don't really know, certainly at the moment, whether it was a kind of that Arteta wants to freshen up, or maybe Steve Round himself wants to do something else, or where that kind of dynamic is. And it's kind of happened at the beginning of pre-season, so it didn't happen immediately at the end of last season. So that doesn't suggest to me that there's been like a falling out, or he was rubbish or anything like that. Otherwise, I'm sure it would have happened sooner. It just seems like everyone's gone away, had their summer a little bit, thought about it, and this has happened. I have to say, and this isn't a reflection, I don't think, anyway, on his impact. I kind of forgot he was there. Yeah. Because AirPods Albert Stuyvenberg, he just seems to be a bit more prominent. Even like when Arteta had COVID and couldn't be on the touchline, it was Stuyvenberg who took the team over. So Round, certainly publicly, it seemed more like he was third, if that makes sense. But then like the coaching staff now is so vast that it's kind of difficult to tell. I think it would be. So and look, him coming in at the time when Arteta started, it's Arteta's first ever managerial job. Steve Round was someone he knew very well, particularly from Everton. Probably made sense to have someone he knew very, very well, and had worked with before. But this is what Arteta's fifth season as a coach now. So like he's not like a new coach anymore. So it makes sense, I think. I think what will be interesting, sorry, Steve Round, like the actual departure isn't that interesting, not least because we don't really have a sense of what he does, which again is not to say he does nothing. But I think what will be really interesting is who comes in and what kind of profile of coach it will be. Will it be another like very experienced guy like Steve Round who's been around? And or will it be like will it be someone a bit younger? It'll be really interesting to see who comes in and replaces him. And I imagine that's something that will happen quite quickly, because if it's kind of taken them till July to do this, I'd like to think that the conversation wasn't broached last week, that perhaps they had some inkling that this was going to happen, and that therefore the replacement is going to be relatively imminent. And that's kind of what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Whoever it is, it has to be someone that Mikel Arteta really trusts and really will listen to. I think there is huge value to having other voices in the room. No matter how good you think Pep is or Klopp is or Mikel is or any of those guys, multiple brains, multiple voices that have good insight, that trust each other is better than one. Ultimately, the manager, the buck stops here. The manager will be the one making decisions. The manager will be the one making critical choices in critical moments throughout the season. But the more trusted voices there are in the room that are insightful can add something to his process, the better. So hopefully it'll be someone he trusts, right? Who's not there to just put out cones and run some drills, but someone who can add something to the process. Paul, I don't feel super inclined to go much further on this topic. But I know if I ask you a question about a different topic and you want to talk about this topic, you'll then roll back to this topic and talk about it anyway. And then I'll make a frustrated face and the people on the YouTube will say there's a strain between the podcasters. And so to avoid that happening, I'm going to say, what are your thoughts on the Steve Round departure?
Ouch. He was, we got him from Aston Villa, where he had become their director of football. And I think we got him at a time. Obviously, there was a relationship there, as Tim points out. They knew each other at Everton. He was a good football guy, a good coachy kind of a guy, had a good overview of the league. And when you think how important it has been to Arteta and probably to many of the coaches now looking at buying players within the league, you know, he had that extra pair of eyes in the ears on teams we were facing in the league, in the Premier League, what other clubs were doing, the medium, smaller clubs where you need to pick up the points that Aston Villa would have known. Who's who in the zoo in terms of up-and-coming players where Aston Villa would have shopped. Well, those things have all changed now. We're now in the era of specificity for Mikel Arteta, and he's probably itching to add a certain specific set of skills to the team. And Steve Round made his contribution, had his day, but we've gone away from the general good footballing guy who knew how to work with Arteta at a time when maybe Arteta wasn't super confident about Arsenal's director of footballing. I wanted to bring in a guy who knew a lot about football and could coach and had a good relationship with him. And now he wants specificity. He's looking at City. He's thinking, what do we need to beat those bastards? There are some skill sets I'd like to add, some perspectives, some cut and thrust. And that's why I think.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's clearly a fascinating topic, that we could do a whole podcast on, and we're just not going to do that. Not because we're not interested in it, and that we've just thrown it in there to have something to talk about, but because there's so much to get to, and we don't want to leave anything on the table. Paul, stay with you for a second because, I can manufacture a topic out of this. Matt Turner saved a couple of penalties. He's been quite.
I've got an interesting thought on that.
Yeah, well, I was going to lead to one I thought, but why don't we go with yours instead?
I don't know who said it. Somebody on Twitter. Or was it Threads, where I now have 4 followers and I'm catching up fast? No, it was on Twitter. And they said, you know what, maybe we should look at using Aaron Ramsdale for saving penalties, in penalty shootouts at the end of game. And I think that's very interesting.
Look at Turner for saving penalties.
Yeah, what did I say?
You said Aaron Ramsdale, who, as of the time of recording, is still our number 1 goalkeeper.
Oh, Jesus, what an idiot.
That's all right.
I told you about that dream I had, didn't I?
Yeah. Yeah. Pete's going to be on the next podcast. Please continue.
Yeah, we get to. So I'll tell everybody about the dream because you guys have heard it. So I had this dream, and it was kind of a bit of a nightmare, where the podcast was starting up, and we send out a link, and you join on, and it's me, and I get there, and it's Tim, and Clive, and Elliot, and some guy called Pete is already there, and I'm having trouble amazingly with the mute button, but it's not just I can't hit the mute button, but there's something wrong with the sound, and the guys can see me but they can't hear me, and I should have just WhatsApped them that I'll drop off because I had technical problems, but I didn't because I was in a fever to get on the pod, and I pissed everybody off, and Clive and Tim, who don't normally get pissed off with me, seemed grumpy and pissed off, and Elliot seemed passive aggressive because Clive and Tim dropped off, and it was me and this guy Pete. I don't know what the deal was there. I'd never seen this guy before, but he was obviously there to make a move. Right, Matt.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp.
I was genuinely quite shook. I surprised myself how I felt the next morning. Matt Turner, penalties. I like that idea. I don't know if that's still the thing out there because I never feel Aaron Ramsdale or indeed any Arsenal goalkeeper bar Emiliano Martinez, who plays for another team at this point, is ever going to save a penalty for us. They always go the wrong way. So I quite liked that. And the other thing about Matt Turner was a very touching picture of a kid that he had got to know along the way, who I guess is no longer with us. And he'd worn a T-shirt with RIP for the kid.
Malia, I think it was. She passed.
Yeah. Very you just get a very genuine sense with Matt Turner. There's a lot to like about him. He's obviously working like crazy on using his feet. So interesting year coming up for him. Interesting preseason because he'll play roughly half the minutes the way they do things, at least in the early days. and a lot of football to be played next year. And, what will his role be? I don't think Arteta is going to back off wanting to win Champions League games at every turn. So it's the cup competitions. And yeah, there's a whole, he's probably right where he doesn't want to be as a second keeper, in that he's good, he's coming along, but is he good enough for Arteta to say, that's what we'll do in these Champions League games? So there is actually a lot to talk about with Matt Turner, only not much grist to the mill to discuss it, because Arteta hasn't tipped his hand yet.
Yeah. So that's where I wanted to go with this, Tim, for you, is that Matt Turner is a very good goalkeeper. And it's so interesting because he came to football so late, at least top level football. But he is very good. He's the USA number one keeper, obviously. He just proved that he can save penalties and win trophies, even if it is kind of a silly third-tier trophy or whatever the Gold Cup is qualifying as these days. But I'll give you what I think of with Matt Turner. This is going to sound a little weird, but I think it's possible that Matt Turner might be a better shot stopper than Aaron Ramsdale, who is quite good in his own right. Like, Ramsdale's excellent 1v1, but as all the data guys will tell you, and they love to tell you, and it's become a fetish thing now in the data community to tell you, Aaron Ramsdale ranks not very well as just a shot stopper generally. I don't know that I've seen that with my eyes. That's what the data would tell you, but he's very good in 1v1s. I think Turner might be better. But in a crunch moment, I still feel like Turner's someone who might make an error that Ramsdale wouldn't, maybe with the ball at his feet. And that's maybe predicated on some of the things I saw from him when he first arrived, and we were worried we had another runner sit on our hands from just, one or two preseasons, as opposed to actually giving the guy a hot minute to get bedded in. But other than the Granit Xhaka move, which we've already made, there are some people where if you said, name a position on the pitch where our first 11 could get stronger, very hard. We have a very good first 11. Some people might say Ramsdale. And I want to be clear, I do not identify Ramsdale as an issue whatsoever. I love him. He's young. He's way pre-primed by goalkeeper standards, and I think he's going to only just get better and better. But does Matt Turner have a chance to make it a proper competition? I'm not saying does Ramsdale need to be upgraded. Is there a window for Matt Turner to make this a proper competition in your view?
I have to say I don't really see it. And in one respect, that's just when you buy a backup goalkeeper, that's just what happens. And we've just given Aaron Ramsdale a new contract as well, which shows you that, the manager's very pleased with him at the moment. I always felt it was a slightly odd move for Matt Turner, I have to say, given that he's just become USA's number one, and maybe he's not under enough challenge for that to be an issue yet. But my sense is if this season coming goes like last season, which I think it probably will unless Ramsdale gets injured, I think he might look elsewhere at that point. And look, maybe just being at Arsenal for a couple of years will raise his profile, and maybe that helps him to get a better club down the line. I don't know. But I just don't see it. And the other thing that I was always slightly surprised about as well is precisely everyone identified that had seen him before he came to the club was that he wasn't at this stage going to be able to provide anything close to what Ramsdale does in possession. And, maybe, like I say, maybe when you buy a backup goalkeeper, it is what it is. The whole thing is you're not going to get someone who's as good as the first choice guy. And maybe they had some kind of sense that they could develop him there. But if he's not playing, I don't really see how we can. Go on, Paul.
On the thought that, because I agree with you, why did he come to Arsenal? And then you watch those training videos the goalkeepers do, the intense training they do. He must have had the schooling of his life over the last couple of years. And I do wonder if, to your point, he might be reaching a point where he's like, well, that's great. They've trained to be Jesus out of me. I've learned all the ninja stuff that the top level goalkeeper, ever watch a goalkeeper training thing? Those guys work like crazy. Absolute bananas. And if you ever hear them talking, Ramsdale or talking with other goalkeepers, they're hyper competitive in training. That's their jam. That's how they keep sharp, especially for the guys who don't get to play that much. So they're And you see it in the England goalkeeper training videos. I mean, those guys go at it like, their lives are on the line. They're trying to prove a point against each other, shot after shot, save after save. So I suspect he's got huge amounts out of it in terms of just his professionalism, his skills, his ability to play at a top level, etc. And that's probably been very appealing to the US national team. But there comes a point, and the question is he approaching the point where he's got that and now he needs to play? So, yeah, it's interesting times.
And I suspect next summer, if things haven't changed, that's probably the point he'll arrive at. And look, that's probably how it should be for a backup goalkeeper. You want a backup goalkeeper who's got the ambition to be number one and all of that. And really, if you have a good backup goalkeeper, they shouldn't want to stay very long. If they do, it's probably because they're enjoying the salary a bit too much and not that asked about playing. So I'd always want like a backup in any position who is like really set on challenging for that number one spot, and I believe that he is, and that's probably good for Ramsdale as well. So like it's a decent situation for Arsenal, but yeah, I do wonder maybe whether he could have gone to another European club and maybe played a bit more. But then Ramsdale might get injured earlier in the season and he might get a prolonged shot at it. So things can change very quickly.
Yeah, I'm going to upset some people here, but like MLS is not a big league. It's a league in a big country, and it's a nice league that's been developed, and it's obviously its stature is going to grow with Lionel Messi arriving, and there are things about that have gotten really quite good. And it's fun to go to games, and it's a lovely culture, but it is not the Premier League. It is not the Champions League. And you say, well, why would he want to go be the backup? Because in his mind, I'm sure, first of all, as all athletes do, he thinks, I'm going to have a chance to go win a job there. I don't think when he came to Arsenal, you could say 100% the guy who had been relegated twice was going to be someone he couldn't get past. I'm sure in his mind, he thought there was an opportunity for that. But more than that, if you're Matt Turner at that stage in your career, with the career trajectory you've had coming from nowhere, and you're thinking, okay, maybe I get 6 starts. I'm going to start in front of 60,000 people at the Emirates Stadium in a Premier League game. I'm going to start, maybe I'm going to play Europa League. Fine. I'll get to play in a European semifinal or a European quarterfinal. I'll get to play in an FA Cup semifinal at Wembley. Those are experiences he wasn't going to get in MLS. And maybe not anywhere else that was interested in him at that point in his career. Because it's such an unusual career trajectory. He is the U.S. number one. I don't think it's close. He's staring down the barrel of a US/Mexico/Canada World Cup in a few seasons. I'm sure he'll want to be the number one for that. And I agree with you, Tim. There's going to be a window where, to make sure he doesn't lose hold on that position, he's going to have to be playing. I think the real litmus test for Matt Turner, you guys, does he get Champions League games? Does he get the group stage of the Champions League? Because I don't care who you are. If you're Matt Turner and you get to start Champions League games, that's something you didn't think you'd get in your career at some point just a few seasons ago. So I think that will be the litmus test is, does Mikel Arteta have the trust in him to give him the Champions League group stage? He'll get the League Cup. He'll probably get that first FA Cup tie, maybe a couple FA Cup ties. Will he get Champions League? And that's going to be interesting to see. And yeah, by the way, if Ramsdale has to miss 3 weeks, he's our keeper, and I think we'd feel really good about that. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm with Tim. I don't think there is a legitimate competition here per se. I don't think that there's a path to Matt Turner just winning the job outright over Ramsdale. I guess the path would have to be Ramsdale misses time and Turner comes in and does like unbelievably well to the point you can't take him out. Or I guess Ramsdale gets off to an uneven start and Turner does Champions League games and is brilliant. But it's really at the margins. It's a 10% kind of thing. So I don't particularly see it happening. I do feel like Turner's a good guy to have at Arsenal. I'm happy he's there. As an American, obviously, like it's kind of fun for me, but I think he won't want to lose that number one place ahead of a World Cup in his home country. And so there's going to come a point where he has to make sure he's got that locked down by playing more. Not a lot out there on the transfer front and not a lot else happening. Before we talk preseason, which I do want to do, let's talk about this behind closed doors game. Paul, I have no opinion of it, really. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch the highlight. You couldn't watch it. I didn't watch the highlight package. I saw the goals. Watford scored first. We pegged them back. I think it was Norton Cuffey brought the ball up the right, and then Marquinhos slotted in the rebound. This game, nothing really of note. Do you have any notes on this game, or can we talk about the last thing I had on my list other than preseason, which is the U21 Euros?
No, I have nothing on this game. I think it's nice that they can climb the hedge, go next door, have a bit of a kick around, all get on and stuff.
Yeah.
But not really. I mean, it's got to be about as they want this to be as low key as possible, so that nobody kicks anybody. Everybody has a bit of a run around. It's the most fitness of fitness sessions. I mean, in many ways, the next bunch of games, despite the fact that we will read so much into them, I certainly will. The manager probably wants the world. I mean, Arsenal was never very keen on having too much hype around the preseason because it's really about fitness and all that kind of stuff. And yet, as we're about to pivot into preseason, certainly in recent times, a good preseason seems to augur well for a good start to the season, and a bad season preseason. I had this picture come up in my mind of Willian and you, Elliot, in that preseason where Willian came back and you were convinced he'd put on an extra £30, and in fact,
and I
he
wasn't
was wearing. He was wearing some kind of measurement GPS health fitness thing. I think he had a whole lab on him. His body mass was 50%, some kind of vest he was wearing. Now, he might have had an extra pound or two, but you never know from wearing this thing. And he was waddling around with this thing, and you were beside yourself, semi-mental, looking at him on the pitch for Arsenal, not playing particularly well.
It's funny that you have the hubris to still represent any of my Willian opinions as the wrong side of the Willian debate. I feel that if we're going to reference Willian, we need to be clear on who was largely in the right on the Willian opinions. But thank you. Yeah.
Justice for Willian. I haven't given up.
Never. Well, okay. I do actually have, I think, one meaty topic we can get into before we do our preseason preview kind of thing. And that's Emil Smith-Rowe. Tim, congrats to England. I'm sure you were feeling a swell of nationalistic pride, or I should say patriotic pride. Nationalistic pride would be a different thing.
A bulge of pride.
A bulge of patriotic pride. But let's just push past this. When England won the U21 Euros, and I really don't care about that, but I do care about Emil Smith-Rowe. I am fascinated by this player because I think he is a player of immense talent on the ball. I think he is a player who could be a huge boon for us if we're able to keep him fit and find a way to use him. But as I watched him in that game, in what I thought was an incoherent system that the coaches had put out, if I'm honest, pressed up against the touchline, pretty isolated from where all the play was, I was really trying to watch him off the ball. I'm no Clive, so I don't know how to watch football. I just watch the ball get kicked from one player to the next and go, ooh, he kicked the ball good to that player. But this time I was just watching Smith-Rowe. And really, as I watched, I thought to myself, all right, I know he's trying to build up fitness, and this is a U21 game and he's got to be a little cautious, but it is a final, and I'm sure he very much wants to win it. I saw a player who, when the ball came to his feet, it was like a light switch. It's lightning. The tempo injection is clear. The ability to play 1-2s, to drive the ball into dangerous space. He didn't get many opportunities, but when he does, it's eye-catching. But when he doesn't have the ball, is he pulling away from his marker? Is he finding the space to get into to be available? Is he tracking runners? One time the fullback pressed up, and it seemed pretty clear his role was to drop back into the space behind, and Spain hit that space, and then Smith-Rowe woke up and was like, oh, shoot, and started tracking back. It's the off-the-ball intensity for me as I watch him that I think is going to be the reason, if there is a reason, that Mikel doesn't want to pick him and that he doesn't get into the plan other than the fitness issues. Do you have a chance to watch any of that? And whether you did or you didn't, do you have a thought on that aspect of Smith-Rowe's game? We all know what he can do with the ball at his feet. I don't think it's questioned, but does he have the other parts of the game positionally and off the ball to get into Mikel's plans when he's fit?
Yeah, sure. So let me preface that by saying I didn't see a single second of the under-21s
Can't blame
tournament
you. Not a brilliant game. I'm
whatsoever.
honest. Yeah.
But what's really interesting about the under-21s tournament is clear there were meant to be 2 Arsenal players at this tournament, but Fabio Vieira pulled out with an injury, which we're told is not a serious one. But for him, if he misses any of this pre-season, that's got to be bad news for him. So particularly with Kai Havertz coming, like I do think there's perhaps something we can talk about more in pre-season, like a kind of what next for Fabio Vieira. But Smith Rowe is clearly the player. I think Arsenal having made it clear that they're not going to entertain selling him this summer, like that's probably the biggest, I don't know if question mark, talking point of the summer. And clearly, like when Smith Rowe went to the under-21s championship last summer, how often do these happen? Why are they happening every summer? But when he went last summer, I just, again, like I'm not like close to the player on the training ground every day, and I'm sure the club know what they're doing, but that struck me as a startling decision to let him do that last summer, and it really did seem to cause him quite a lot of literal damage. I think what's more interesting this time, right? Clearly, from an Arsenal perspective, this has been a bit about fitness, a bit about confidence. Clearly, I think there must have been a conversation about his usage because he didn't start every game at this championship. I don't think he played 90 minutes very often, and I don't know whether that was pre-planned or whether that was like a comment on his performance or anything. But look, once it got to the final, he was selected. And I think that does tell you something. But did he come off after about 65 minutes or something?
Yeah, 65, 70 minutes.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to know whether that was a conversation with Arsenal, because this summer it does seem to make quite a lot more sense because he just hasn't played very much football since he went to the Euro under-21s last summer. And so it's like a bit of a tune-up. But what's interesting now is what does his pre-season look like? Because clearly he's going to have a bit of a break, but how much of a break? Because on one hand, like going to the Euros and building his fitness and, a bit of his confidence. And let's face it, he's way above this level, or he should be. Like, I mean, he's nearly 23 anyway, so he's just snuck in age-wise. And he's been playing for Arsenal's first team for quite a few years. Like, under 21s, in the ordinary run of things, should be well beneath him. And that was another problem I had with him going last summer, was just like, what is the point in this? Under 21s is for development, but we've been able to use it, I think, as a bit of a fitness exercise. But for me, it's about what does pre-season look like for him now? Because quite often, and I think we saw this with Vieira last season, and we saw it with Lacazette, I think, a few seasons ago, if you fall out of step in pre-season, it can really impact the season you go on to have.
Yep.
Like if you're just a little bit out of step, even if you come back like late August, then you're doing your pre-season and you're just out of sync with your teammates, and that's always like a bit of a worry. Now with someone like Smith Rowe, we're not going to look at like wanting to start him from the first game anyway, so I think that probably matters less. And he didn't go into the break with the same level of fitness as everyone else. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's been on a different timeline for a very long time now. So in a sense, there's a bit of time there for him to get back up to speed. And I really don't think we should be looking at, why isn't Smith Rowe starting yet? That shouldn't really be a question until like at least late September. But yeah, I'm interested in that. Like, does he come back quickly and go, no, I want back in here, I want to be in the plans? Or does he, how is he managed? And the same for Fabio Vieira. I'm very interested in that, what this pre-season looks like for him, because I really think missing last pre-season really took something away from him. And if that happens again, particularly now we've got like players like Havertz and Trossard have come in since then, and we're keeping Smith Rowe and all of that, like, you can quickly get forgotten. I remember that summer Gilberto Silva was away at the Copa America. He captained Brazil. They won it. Great for him. But Matthew Flamini played brilliantly, and he never got his place back after that. Like sometimes it can. I guess it's is this going to make or break Smith Rowe? It feels like it's going to do one of them, because I don't think he can have another season like the one he's just had.
The problem is, right, like time just moves so quickly, clubs move so quickly. No matter how talented you think a player is, there is a period where you have to stop waiting for them to arrive and you have to make other plans. We waited for Wilshere to arrive forever. And granted, it was similarly, couldn't be more talented, couldn't be more injury prone. And we waited for him to arrive and waited for him to arrive and planned for him and had that squad place ready for him so that when he came back in and became the player we all knew he could be, he could lead us somewhere. And it didn't materialize. Now, thankfully, Arsenal are in a much better position right now in that we don't really need ESR, but you always need a player of that talent if he can make it work. The thing I kind of look at too is Kai Havertz at left 8 is an experiment to some extent. We don't know how it'll work. Granit Xhaka is leaving. We knew we didn't know how that worked. It worked. Now we're moving to something that we don't know how to work. And we don't know what's behind him. It's probably Fabio Vieira. We don't know how that's going to work. It might be Smith Rowe. Now, we don't know how that's going to work, but we know he's a good player who can play for Arsenal if he can stay fit. And if Mikel trusts him. And if he can do what is needed off the ball in that space. And so it is an important squad position, because I got to level with you. Even if Kai Havertz works and Martin Odegaard does work, we know that. If either of them aren't available, or if for one reason or another, the Havertz thing doesn't work, my goodness, it's Fabio Vieira and it's Emil Smith Rowe. And I know which one I trust more to play a lot of Premier League minutes if needed, but I don't know which one Mikel trusts more, and I don't know which one's going to be available. So Paul, the Smith Rowe thing it's maybe more relevant than people think, because while we may look at it as a luxury, like, if we can get Smith Rowe fit and firing, that's a nice piece to have. It may not be a luxury. It may be a necessity that we have someone that can slot into that role if needed and do it at a high level. And he's someone who might be able to do it. Do you have any concerns? Let's set the fitness aside thing. As a player, it's been a while since he's been relevant in, at the Premier League level. And I don't know when his preseason is going to start. I don't know how much time we're going to give him off following the U21s, but he needs to get in there and he needs to show Mikel that he can be trusted and he should be picked and he can stay fit. What's your level of confidence? Let me not phrase it in terms of concerns. Let's talk about level of confidence that he can get in, have some impact in preseason, and force his way into the plan, because I do think the role that he might play is one that we need to solve for.
Yeah, so I think the most realistic way this works out to be a good season for Smith Rowe is that his role is as a kind of a super sub, a guy who comes on and impacts the ends of games. What we've looked to see from Eddie Nketiah, but he hasn't really delivered as a sub that comes on and brings a goal, because that's a period of the game where we may be chasing a goal, and his ability to play at a high tempo. I mean, his superpower is the kind of give and go, the 1-2, the accelerate the pace, inject some energy into the passing, basically give it and run. And on the other hand, the challenge for him and for Arteta with him is Arteta wants a player who can hold possession and control the tempo and good in possession. That's not really what I've ever seen Smith Rowe do. He doesn't really put his foot on the ball, have a look around, slow it down a little bit, wait for other players to get into position. All those things you want to do across 90 minutes, across different kind of games, across a season. I think that's kind of the big mismatch between a player that I'm sure Arteta, all of us think is talented, gifted, etc., but the specificity isn't there. I do think we have another option at the left 8, although I have Kai Havertz down as our default left 8. We'll see how that plays out. We also have Jorginho and Declan Rice, and Jorginho looks like a very happy fella, happy to be part of things, obviously close with and to Arteta. So he obviously sees a role there. And so you've two ways of slicing that, but you could easily see Rice in certain games or certain times taking over the left 8 spot and having Jorginho as the playing the Jorginho role. And so we do have options there. And so that's less my concern. A bit like you, it's less my concern. More my concern is things working out for Smith Rowe. And I think if he can harness that ability to come on 60 minutes, 70 minutes, and be the guy off the bench you bring on to make something happen, he may have a good season with us and then go on to bigger and better things elsewhere next season. That's not the scenario I love, but I do think it's the most likely positive scenario for Smith Rowe. Is he makes important contributions down the stretch of games to impact off the bench, which is a wonderful thing to have, and sets himself up for the next stage, because I don't think he's an Arteta type player. I always had him down for the left 8 spot, but because of his skill sets, he'd probably, if he was going to have a chance for Arteta, it would be off the wing, I think, because he doesn't need to be as high touch, or he doesn't need to be as possession oriented on the Martinelli role.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good and important point, right? Is that your importance to structure and the degree to which you prevent vulnerabilities increases dramatically the more central you're playing, right? And I think that's the thing. He may want him as a left 8, but that player has a lot of responsibilities to structure, to position, to ball security. Also makes the Kai Havertz off the ball questions more urgent, I would say. We don't need to go too deep on Smith Rowe. I think there'll be more time in preseason, hopefully, to see him and analyze him. But Tim, let's just end it on this.
Elliot, can I add one quick point on that?
Please. Mm-hmm.
So I think the really important thing, apart from the defensive aspect of the role, is the possession bit. That thing they talk about with City and Grealish, where he's the side they use. I mean, it's kind of a bit imperceptible, but he's actually the slower possession guy to let the other guys get into position, so they got the rest defense and they're positioned in the attacking third. And it is a bit subtle, because very often I don't really see it as being slow, but it's that extra touch or two that gets the other guys into their spots. And I think that's even more than the fact that he may not be defensively aware. It's the fact that he doesn't look around. He doesn't have that chill, the la pausa, that moment with the ball that allows other people to get their spots. That's just not what he does. And I think that's the thing, more than anything, that Arteta is looking for in terms of specificity. Vieira definitely has it. He definitely has the heads up. I'm going to take an extra touch. Odegaard does it all the time. Saka is really our Grealish for me. He takes that extra touch or two at times to let other people get into their spots, or for players to get committed. All those subtle, clever little things. It's really the in possession thing that I think will hold Smith Rowe back, rather than the fact that he won't be much of a defender. Anyway, that was it.
Yep, I understand. And I think, Tim, just as a final point on this, like, whether it's going to be Smith Rowe or not, do you regard that? I mean, when I look at our 11, whether you think Declan Rice is the greatest player ever or just a very, very good player, I don't think many people have him as lower than that. You know what I mean? Declan Rice is going to come in and probably be somewhere between holy shit and just really good, which is fine. Kai Havertz, the margin of opinions is wider. And the margin of opinions on him playing that position specifically are even wider. Is that the area? I mean, Smith Rowe would be needed in your view, and needs to show certain traits in his game to be trusted in, because it's the one that I don't see us having a particularly high number of very trusted options to go play there.
Yeah. I mean, it shows you what Arteta thinks about the evolution of this position, that the options we're talking about are like primarily attackers, are guys who could and do often play in the front line in Vieira, Smith Rowe and Havertz, and all three of them are a little bit of an unknown quantity there. I guess the Havertz thing, actually, I guess it reminds me a bit of Gabriel Jesus, in that when we brought him in last year, he hadn't really been playing centre forward. And we kind of said, well, actually, in our system, you can still do all the stuff that you were good at on the wing at City, but you'll just do it from a slightly more central vantage point and, reconnect with that position. And in a sense, we're doing something similar with Havertz, because we're saying, come and play a position much more similar to the one you were playing at Leverkusen, essentially. So that's such an interesting position, because we don't have a known quantity there, really. Like, we've gone from Xhaka, like arguably the most known quantity in our team, one of our longest serving players, one of those guys. We knew his flaws, we knew his limitations, we knew his strengths, etc., etc. And I'm still campaigning to say that this should have been Xhaka's position all along, and actually what we were doing before that was playing him out of position, given how he adapted to it. But like, you can see that's the evolution Arteta's looking at. He wants this to be another attacking position, a much more like Ødegaard style, kind of like, we don't think of Ødegaard as a defender or someone who's going to block shots on the edge of the box or anything like that. And Xhaka didn't do that often anyway. But also, I think it says something about how Arteta views Declan Rice, in that I think he's thinking, this is a guy I can leave to cover a little bit more space than perhaps he would have been asked to cover had Xhaka been in the team. So he's not looking at the defensive deficit of losing Xhaka. He's looking at the attacking deficit of adding some of these players. And for Smith Rowe, I mean, potential, like if I was Smith Rowe, I'd look at that as an opportunity, certainly. But really, I think it's the wide positions. I still view Smith Rowe there at the moment, particularly because, you know, that would bring us up to 4 wide players with Nelson, Smith Rowe, Saka and Martinelli. I know Trossard can play both of those. And he's another candidate for that left 8. We saw him play there a couple of times last season. So how all of this gets sorted out. But I still kind of see Smith Rowe on the wide left, and really he's got to at least aim to get back to where he was 2 seasons ago, where it was on a timeshare with Martinelli. Like, you look at that horrible Newcastle game we lost last May, like Smith Rowe started ahead of Martinelli that day. Like, that was very much a timeshare until last season, and I think that's more what Smith Rowe has to aim for. But I also think that Arteta likes the idea of Nelson off the left as well, as someone who's similar to Martinelli, but perhaps a little bit different with the way he takes players on and looks to get in on his right foot. I kind of think that's potentially where Arteta sees him. So Smith Rowe, I'm so surprised we're keeping him. I completely in my head written him off and out of the club precisely because of this, precisely because I'm still not sure I see where or what his role is at the moment. And look, you know, maybe we'll find out, but I've just still got this little hunch that he doesn't really fit anywhere. And yeah, I guess a little bit like Matt Turner, if things haven't developed significantly in the next 12 months, which they could, but if they haven't, like, I'd kind of be asking questions about why we kept him, and, you know, would be suggesting that he should go in that scenario.
Yeah, good point. I think, by the way, like, I don't think it's 100% given that Smith Rowe is still at Arsenal at the end of this window. I'm not saying that's what I'd want to happen. I'm just saying I don't think it's a given. Now, I guess you could say it would be silly to sell maybe at the low ebb of his value in some ways, but you can tell a story to a potential buying club that, well, he wasn't fit last season. If you look at the season before that, he was a huge contributor. If he's fit this season and mostly sits on the bench and doesn't play, then you've really not just tanked his value, but held back his career. So everybody has to be really thoughtful about what they do with him now, because he deserves to have the best career he can. We're going to need that role filled by someone we trust and will use. I think critical preseason ahead, and that can lead us to the conversation about preseason that I want to have, which was going to be the bulk of this episode, but we've managed to find 48 minutes of things to talk about. I guess, to be fair, some of that was Paul's dream, which I regret, but you know, it is what it is. What I don't regret is taking AG1 every morning, because that's not something you can regret, because it is good for your body, and you want to be doing things that are good for your body. Why do you hate your body? Don't love your body. Now, don't love your body too much, or if you're going to, at least, you know, wait till the podcast is over. Let's keep things separate, everything in their box. But one way you can love your body is by taking AG1. And I want to call out, very importantly, that they have changed their URL. So it is drinkag1.com, drinkag1.com/vision. That's our little thing there. Anyway, I take AG1 in the morning because what does it do? It's helped me wean myself off the excess caffeine that I've been taking. I was drinking too much coffee. Now I've got that, I think, to a healthy level. It helped with gut health issues I have struggled with for a long time. Energy, which I don't struggle with, and I think AG1 has certainly helped with that. It is designed by athletes. It was designed to be a recovery product as well, right? Because athletes, they need to be able to recover and go again. You will be able to recover and go again precisely because it is designed to help you do that. So designed by athletes with athletes in mind. 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, adaptogens, probiotics. It's going to give you everything you need, and it's going to do it without all the sugar that you get from multivitamins. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/vision. That's drinkag1.com/vision. Check it out. And before we say goodbye to this ad read section, which I know is everybody's favorite part of the podcast, I want to tell you about Oakley, sunglasses company that you've probably heard of. But what you need to know about Oakley is that Oakley is a proud sponsor of this podcast, and we are proud to have them on board this podcast because they make great sunglasses. Now, there's a couple of things I would say about sunglasses. The one thing I would say about sunglasses is that they go over your eyes to shield them from the sun. That is the thing that a lot of people overlook about sunglasses, but it is true. And I'm here to tell you, Oakley's do it brilliantly because of the Prism lens technology. When you put on great lenses with great polarization, the difference it makes when you're outside enjoying the out of doors, as Tim said, he saw the yellow thing in the sky the other day. The yellow thing in the sky the other day has rays that are harmful to your eyes, but Prism technology protects your eyes and makes it easy to go outside and enjoy being outside. Driving, you can see clearer. Golfing, you can see clearer. Playing sports, being active, running around. It's important to see. You'll be able to see more clearly. Now, they also have beautiful styles. And the thing that I think is so true about so many sunglass companies is that the styles are all sort of mimetic, right? They all kind of imitate one another. Is that what mimetic means? I think, right? When you kind of like ape another thing, mimetic. I'm getting the nod from Tim. Good use of mimetic. There you go. Check. Good word there. Anyway, but you won't be accused of being mimetic with your Oakley sunglasses because they have styles that are unique. The quality is brilliant. You're going to absolutely love it. Look, it's a long way of saying that you should go to Oakley.com. You should read up on Prism technology, but it's not just a reading website. It is also a shopping website. So while you're there, shop for sunglasses. And then you look like Kylian Mbappe because he wears Oakleys. Future Arsenal legend, Kylian Mbappe. So there you go. Go to Oakley.com. Pick up a pair of sunglasses now. That's going to do it. Tim, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. All right. Preseason. So I have gone all the way from preseason is just a fitness exercise and you should ignore it, which was Tim's original hypothesis, to thinking that preseason is just a fitness exercise and you should ignore the results. I don't think the score lines matter, right? Because like if we're 1-0 up on Barca at halftime, make 11 changes and they win 4-2, with our U19s playing the last 30 minutes of the game, it doesn't matter that we didn't beat Barcelona, although Mikel out, obviously. But it does matter seeing systems, seeing things we're trying, seeing players in positions. So I want to get from each of you the top couple of things that you are looking for specifically this preseason, that are questions you think are critical to answer to kind of ascertain how our season is going to look. I really believe, as I said at the top of the podcast, Paul, last preseason was very instructive. And what do you know? The things we saw last preseason that worked were the things we did at the start of last season, and they worked. What is a top 1 or 2 question you want answered or characteristic of this team that you're going to be looking at clearly, closely in those preseason games, starting this Thursday against Nuremberg, but also very importantly during the USA Tour, where we are likely to see a full complement of what we'd regard as our first team?
Nuremberg. Yes. Well, look, people can be overly analytical about preseason. I agree with that, but like there's lots of important things that happen in preseason. I noticed on the plane that Gabriel Jesus and Kai Havertz were sitting beside each other. You can only imagine the conversations between the two of them. Gabriel Jesus asking Kai Havertz if Arteta has said anything about where he thinks he might be playing this season, and Kai saying, "Oh no, nothing at all." But Jesus was central, and Havertz was to the left of him on the plane. I noticed that much. So there is a risk we'll overanalyze these things. But the first thing I think me and everybody else is going to look at is where does Kai Havertz play? Because preseason's a short period of time. Where did Gabriel Jesus play during preseason? We plopped him in the center. He hit the ground running. From his first preseason game, he looked like a star. Everything clicked around him. We brought in Zinchenko towards the end of the window, plopped him in, to the position he would play. It clicked really quickly. We were off to the races. William Saliba, we didn't screw around. I mean, where else would you play him? To be fair, there was another player in his position before he arrived, but we played him as right centre back. And like one of the things I would be looking at, there was that video yesterday with Saliba showing around in training, and it was only training, but he beat all 11 players twice to score a goal.
I just want to stop you and say that is not an Arsenal training, and that is not from yesterday, just so we're clear. It made the rounds yesterday, and he did look like an absolute imperious, towering god of football. But no, it was not from yesterday at Arsenal training.
Okay, was it another season for another team?
I don't know if it was at Nice or if it was like some training camp thing, because it looked like a sponsored program. They were all, I don't know the background. I just know it wasn't Arsenal training. Let's put it that way.
So you don't know the background.
I know enough to discredit your statement. I don't know enough to provide the actual details, which was really all.
Permission to treat the witness as hostile, Your Honor.
Well, the witness is
the
quite
switcheroo, Elliot. Now I've got you on the back pedal. Right. Anyway, what I will say was he beat all 11 players twice. It does make you think if we ever have a Stones type role for one of our players, it could be William Saliba. I'd like to see him playing a little more ball for us during preseason as a tip to that. But it seems like with Zinchenko and Timber, those will be the options that step into midfield from the defensive line. But Saliba could be an interesting candidate for the role, the John Stones role. But mostly it's going to be around Kai Havertz. In the same way we look for Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko to hit the ground running. You don't screw around. You put them in the position that you want them to settle into so the other players can build the relationships. So, yeah. And then what we do in midfield, who gets the minutes at the number 6 spot. Okay, Rice probably won't be here for a little while. He's on vacation, but we've got Jorginho and Partey. So who gets those minutes and how will that be used and where will Partey play? Do we look to find a new role for him in midfield or as that right back role with Jorginho centrally? Or given the fact that they changed teams at halftime, will the two just play the number 6 and that takes that debate away? But those are the two most interesting spots for me, the number 6 and the left 8.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to argue with that because they're the ones that are changing, right? Tim, as preseason approaches, like, and again, I know you've said, for example, you used to not watch the preseason games, you don't care about them. I think what's shifted, is kind of what I've talked about, which is I think pretty much everybody acknowledges that the results of a preseason game are not particularly relevant. But as the intensity of preseason games is ratcheted up, right? We're not going to the hinterlands in Germany and playing literal farmers, right? We're playing big clubs at big stadiums. We're putting out some first 11 players in formations and positions that look like the way we're going to play during the season. So there are more insights we can glean from it. What are you hoping to learn or questions you're hoping to answer this preseason as you look ahead to the new season?
Yeah, this one's going to be really, really interesting. So clearly preseason, probably the most valuable time for coaches and players because it's the only, obviously in terms of tuning up for the season, but really it's the only opportunity they get if they're thinking of, so this is what I'm going to be looking for, like clearly the 6 and the 8, as Paul said. But the other thing, I think the thing I'm most interested in is the thing is about last season. We came out of pre-season with this kind of new way of playing and it sustained us for a long time. But clearly towards the end of the season, look, we missed some valuable kind of pillars for that style, but clearly there was an element to which teams became familiar with us and it wasn't as effective. And I think Mikel Arteta knows that. And so for me, it's what's different and not just like the personnel. Well, obviously the personnel will dictate that, like Rice and Havertz will make it different. So how? But also the kind of, the Zinchenko inverting from left back kind of thing. First of all, I don't actually know how fit he is at the moment. I don't know how much he's going to play, but clearly at the end of last season, like those last 3 games were basically the start of preseason in a way. And so the stuff we were doing, like looking at Partey at right back and Kivior at left back, and for me, last preseason was about nailing down that style of play once Zinchenko, Saliba and Jesus came into the team. Clearly now Rice and Havertz coming into the team, that needs a bit of nailing. But for me, it's like, what else? What's the other thing that we're going to do? Because I'm convinced that there is going to be an other thing, whether it's, Timber inverting from right back, or is Ben White going to go back to being a centre half? Like all of that stuff in defence, that's the stuff I'm going to be looking for, and not actually from a defensive standpoint, but actually more from the way we build play. And like I don't think inverting Zinchenko is like the only thing we're going to do next season. So it's like, first of all, what else is there in terms of like maybe the right back does it, or the centre back steps into midfield or whatever, and like to what extent does it change? Is that a plan B? Are there 2 plan A's? Is Zinchenko going to be the plan B? Do you know what I mean? Like the arrangement of all of that stuff at the back, that's the stuff I'm most interested in this summer. And I think I'm most interested in it because I can't work it out yet. So I'm very curious to see what happens there.
Yeah, I think low key, the Timber thing is really fascinating to me, because it could be anything from he's just the backup to White, to he has a genuine opportunity to compete with White, to it signals less reliance on Zinchenko, to we're switching fully to a 3-2-5, and he's going to play alongside Zinchenko. Like there's so many things it could signal, and we will get a pretty clear, I think, view on that a couple games into preseason. Before I give you some of the things that I'm particularly curious about, Paul, you have a thought on why maybe things have changed regarding the significance of preseason?
I do. 2 factors. First is big emphasis on marginal gains now. When City sets a bar every season where you got to get to 90 to 100 points, and the reason we pushed them so hard last season was we got off to a flyer. Basically, they've set a standard that you can't miss a beat. In the old days, you had a bit of a sloppy preseason. Your players were getting back from international duty. You give them a little extra time, but they already knew each other. The systems were simpler. It's 4-4-2 or some version of it. And preseason was about fitness. Now it's about coming in, getting a flyer, being tuned up, complex systems with complex roles and relationships all to be defined. And you see it in the fact of the emphasis. We used to have a philosophy of waiting till the end of the window to get a few more players based on price. There might be some good deals out there, that kind of thing. Get 1 or 2 up front, and then see what's available in the market. And that's totally flipped now. You get your key signings in the first, before even preseason starts, so that they're available, bedded in, you're ready to go. And you just see a whole level of marginal gains professionalism about preseason. If we could ask Arteta how important preseason is, he probably thinks it's vital to what's about to happen in both the Premier League and the Champions League going forward. Debugging his software, getting his plans sorted, getting, why did we pay so much for Declan Rice? Well, one of the factors is West Ham knew we needed to get the player in position, ready to go, to build around him. And I think that's a big difference from 4, 5, 6 years ago in terms of the attitude to preseason. It's the results don't matter, but performances do, and systems and players fitting in and finding their groove, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I actually think there's a lot of truth to that. It's going to be interesting for me. I hate to just sort of echo what's been said. The Kai Havertz thing is pretty important. Like the weird thing about losing Xhaka is simultaneously the player in the first 11 I most thought we could upgrade. You guys, you know what I mean? Like I it's weird because he had such a good season, and I felt so good about what he gave us, and And it was such a brilliant send-off for his Arsenal career. By the same token, I really believe that he was playing a role that ultimately there are some qualities he doesn't possess that aren't natural to him, that where we had a chance to get someone in there who's maybe more natural at those things. And I think whether you're looking at data or the way we played, there's a lot of reasons why Kai Havertz could be that guy. There are a lot of reasons Kai Havertz could not be that guy. And then you're in a bit of a holy shit scenario, because I don't think it's quite a Trossard role. I don't think Vieira has shown he's quite ready to be picked regular. Now, look, Vieira, when we signed him, we did the scouting video. We talked about him a lot. The talent is in there for him to be a Premier League level player in my mind, but we have not seen that yet. Smith Rowe can't stay fit. So even if you think that's his role, he's got to prove he can stay fit. The thing about Shaq, it's not just that we're losing a guy who was quite good in that role, surprising to me, I admit. We're losing a guy who can play 38 games. So even if he's a 7 out of 10 in that role, he's a 7 out of 10. You could just plug in every single game. You get leadership, you get reliability. He's going to play every single game and he'll be there. So you don't have to solve for that position. If the Havertz thing doesn't work out, it is the single biggest area where the whole thing could just become a bit of a house of cards. Now, look, I'm not trying to get hysterical. I think we're going to be great again. What I'm saying is that's very much a fulcrum position in my mind, because we go from a player who was consistent and solid and always available to a new arriving player in a new role, in a new system, very, very, very much a question mark with no really established alternative behind him. And that's going to be a challenge. You could say the same about Declan Rice, but I don't really agree, because firstly, I mean, Thomas Partey wasn't available all season, right? We had to do things around Partey's absences or dips in form. Jorginho's still here and not going as far as I'm aware. Maybe he goes to Italy, but maybe Partey stays, by the way. And then maybe Urian Timber can play a little in that role, or maybe you do this, that, or the other thing. I think that's a role we can solve for more than we have any natural way to solve for left 8. So it'll be interesting. Now, I guess, to be fair, maybe what I've forgotten is, well, you could play Jorginho and Rice. You could play Partey and Rice. And then you don't need to solve for left 8. So maybe the left 8 solution is we do almost what we did with Xhaka, right? Where we go with more of a central midfieldy player in that role. And then you have a little bit more stability, and maybe you lose a little bit in attack, but you have a little more consistency. So maybe what I'm kind of missing here is that if Havertz can't do that, maybe it's Jorginho doing that, or it's Rice doing that, or it's, a central midfieldy type player doing that. Paul, thoughts?
So I think Kai Havertz is going to be great. The question is, what happens when Declan Rice isn't on the pitch? Because I think there's a very natural partnership where they complete each other, Havertz and Rice. But for the games Rice isn't playing, and you got, say, and assuming we don't have Partey, but I guess that's to be decided one way or the other, you might have Jorginho, Havertz, Zinchenko, all on the same side of the pitch. And your midfield is Jorginho, Havertz, and Odegaard. If you're an opposition team scouting, playing Arsenal, you're thinking, ooh, Arsenal soft in midfield. Where have I heard that before? And so, it's kind of a redux to how we were viewed before. And I think on certain days there'll be some truth to that. So that might be the real issue. What's our lineup with Kai Havertz when Rice isn't available at the 6? That for me is where the question marks are. Your point on Xhaka, Havertz is the guy who has all of Xhaka's non-strengths as his strengths. Arteta said something interesting recently about Odegaard. He's been great, he's been wonderful, all that kind of stuff, but the boy needs to make runs into the box. And we might think, well, hang on a second, he had a really good season, he was getting in the box, he was scoring goals, and I think that's true, but it's kind of against his nature. He was always that guy who wanted to sit on the edge of the box, orchestrating. And yes, he's arriving late, but obviously not to the degree Arteta's still looking for. Well, there will be a natural balance now between Odegaard maybe being a little more cautious to stay in a position and Havertz being the round-doiter, the guy who goes finding the space, makes the runs in behind, does that diagonal over to the left touch that Xhaka used to do, puts in a cross. So I think there's a really nice compliment there, but you need one hell of a player, and we just signed one, Declan Rice, to cover all of that while those guys are doing their thing. And without that, Jorginho, okay, you have the three behind him. You might have Gabriel, Saliba, and White, and maybe White's a little more conservative in that kind of a setup if it's Jorginho in front of them. And he holds back a little bit, and that's where you get it from. There are other ways of slicing it, but that to me is the real question. Havertz answers all of the Xhaka non-strengths with aplomb, but all of the things that Xhaka kind of did subtly of knowing what to do when we don't have the ball, spotting risk, spotting danger, not Havertz's strength, and we'll need to supplement that other ways. And yes, Zinchenko can push up behind him, and they can both be counter-pressy and defend that way. But that doesn't work for 90 minutes across 38 games. So what do you do when you don't have Rice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully we don't have a lot of that problem to answer.
Sure.
Tim, before we get out of here, Tim, just a few other little bits and pieces or things to look out for. Are there any other little storylines? So like there's some things that we think that are assumptions that we don't know. You know, I think I've kind of assumed that Balogun will go, but he's not gone yet. Could Balogun come in and play in preseason and look incredible and we talk him into staying and he has a big role? Could he be a star in the making for Arsenal? I mean, I don't see where it would be, but that'll be interesting to look at. What does Gabriel Jesus look like, right? When last we saw Gabriel Jesus, I think he was not properly rated, in my view, by a lot of fans who maybe didn't love some of his performances during the run-in. I think he was still pretty good. But does he come back and look as electrifying as he looked when he first showed up in preseason last summer and raring to go and, over the knee injury? Like those are things I want to see. Are there other little storylines? I mean, Kieran Tierney's on the tour. What are some, or not on the tour, he's in Nuremberg, I should say. The tour hasn't started yet. Are there any other little storylines or little bits and pieces that you think could be interesting that maybe are flying under the radar at the moment?
Yeah, maybe the Tierney thing, like that's gone a bit quiet on the sale. And I think all of the stuff we understand about Newcastle is that they're going to play ball on FFP. Their transfer business since the takeover has suggested that they're willing to play ball on FFP. They've been like relatively modest given their means, and they continue to be as well. They've just renewed, like they renewed only for a year, but like Paul Drummett and Loris Karius. So clearly they've got a plan where they're doing this quite gradually, and maybe we can't kind of get a fee with them. I think a lot of us just assume because they've got all the money in the world that we'll get exactly what we want, but that does seem to have gone quite quiet. And like I was talking about earlier, maybe there's a route back for Tierney. I kind of don't think there is, but if we decide that everyone's kind of wise to the Zinchenko inverting thing and we want a different way of playing, again, I don't think that's the case, but nevertheless, but like generally, I think holding Tierney, once we get offers for those guys, they'll go. I do think the striker thing is slightly interesting. Basically, my kind of thesis for this summer is clearly like the bulk of the business is done, which is mega impressive before the first pre-season friendly. But I think really now it's going to be a case of if we sell all of Holding, Cedric and Tierney, I think we'll buy another defender. If Partey goes, we'll have to buy another midfielder. If neither of those happen, then I do think that we could bring in another forward. Perhaps if we do well on the Balogun sale, for example, or maybe Nketiah is the one we get an offer for and he goes instead. I think that's less likely just because of the contract situations of the respective players, because I kind of think with Nketiah, if we got a good offer, we'd take it. But at the same time, given that, what did he sign for 4 or 5 years on like a relatively high, like he's got a strong contract and a high wage, so I don't see that happening. You'd definitely think that selling Balogun this summer is kind of the expedient decision just because of the position he's in compared to Nketiah. But I kind of think that in a world where someone came up with some money for Nketiah, would do it, and we would sign another striker, because I do think that kind of behind Jesus thing, like Trossard, I think is I think he was the second choice there, and I kind of think rightly so. But that's to me, that's the and to a lot of Arsenal fans, I think that's the kind of gap in the squad. That and the kind of Saka backup, is that Reece Nelson? Like, those are the two real questions, I think. And I think a maximum of one of those will be answered this summer. I think that's the thing that we'll talk about in January, put it that way.
Yeah. And all of that will be answered, I think, probably later. So I think some of that will be answered later in the window. We've done a lot of business early, and I know a lot of people were saying, have we done it? When's it going to be announced? But we have. I think now we're going to do a little bit of the cat and mouse game, play the waiting game, see what we can get from clubs. There may be a little bit more poker to be played, so we may have to be patient. Ultimately, the real season is here, right? The time of the year where we're going to find out if the things we have kind of been saying all summer, or at least to the part of summer, still only July 10th, are play out on the pitch. The last thing that I think could be interesting, Paul, is just every season since Mikel's been here, there's kind of been a tweak to what we do. Last season was a pretty big tweak to the way we played. And I think the presumption is because we were so good that we'll just do that again. But, Mikel was really trained by Pep Guardiola. And the thing we know about Pep is he's just constantly tinkering. There's something new, right? I mean, the John Stones role from this past season, that was a new wrinkle. Have we maybe wrongly assumed that we're just going to look like we did last season? Is there a wrinkle coming? Is there a formation switch? Is there a way of playing or a way of using a player that maybe we haven't envisioned? Are you excited to see what the next evolution is, or do you expect that as good as we were, it'll look a lot like it did last season?
I think it'll look a lot like it did last season. I don't think Arteta thinks he's maximized how we could play as of last season. I think the toothpaste gets crammed even a little further up the tube. I think it's more getting the automatisms, getting more options to do similar kinds of things. Havertz over Xhaka is a significant gambit to kind of forward load how we play, and will require some defensive midfield adjustments. Zinchenko doesn't look like a guy who can play 38 games, but Arteta will always want a Zinchenko option. So that to me is probably the biggest area to watch. He won't try and do something different. He just might try and do it from the other side. It might be the Timber option. And so that's going to be fascinating to watch in preseason and early season. Does that guy get off to a flyer? Is he the guy who steps into midfield from the other side? Somebody's going to step into midfield from the back line. And if Zinchenko can't play 50 games, and he can't, Arteta's always going to want that. He's not going to want to have a midfielder forming a two. He's going to want to steal a defender from the back line to step into midfield. Is this the season Saliba tries out in that spot? Is it Timber from the other side? Is somebody else going to step in from Zinchenko's side? So I think it's going to be more of the same, just more. He's going to move the volume knob from 9.5 up to 11 on the way we played last season. Havertz is a big piece of that, but something else in terms of midfield. Obviously, Declan Rice is going to be a big force, and that's going to change. I think teams who played us in the second half of last year would get a shock when they played this team in the first half. If they think they've figured us out, we may not change very much and yet be a very, very different force in the first half of this season. And, his huge focus is going to be the run in that second half of the season, the last 10, 15 games, the consistency across Champions League and Premier League. I'm not sure how much he's really going to change in terms of the system or some weird curveball.
Yeah. I don't think it'll change dramatically. I tend to agree. I think there might be some things that we try that look a little different. What I'm also a little curious about, nervous, if I'm being honest, if I want to put on my whiskers for a minute, is how do we use Saliba in preseason? Are we clearly being careful? Are we clearly not wanting to use him much? Does he maybe come on the last 10 minutes against Barca? Does he not play much? Because, yeah, Paul.
I saw a video yesterday, Elliot, where
Yeah. He looked amazing, didn't he? For an 18-year-old, which is the age he was in that video. It was weird. He was on a tricycle and he was saying, "Mama." But like the thing about Saliba, I said this, his signing, I think, is as important as anything we'll do this summer. But how confident are we in the back? Do we just throw him out there and he looks like Saliba and everything's fine and nothing to worry about at all, healed up? Or is it a situation where it looks like we're keeping him wrapped in cotton wool and we're being really careful and protective? Is he going to be ready to start the season? I think a lot of how we play at the beginning of the season depends on William Saliba being ready to play at the beginning of the season. That's not a player you can replace, as we've seen. Even bringing in Timber, which means we could play White at center back and we could play Timber at right back. You don't just replace a William Saliba. He's at a level that you can't just replace. So I'll be looking to that. I think we can leave it there. We manufactured like 80 minutes of podcast out of that, which is pretty remarkable if you think about it. And the funny thing is now I feel like I could go on and tell you more things I want to see in preseason. But the good news is we won't have to wait long. We play on Thursday, which means we might hold the Thursday pod till Friday just because we have an actual game, which will mean we'll have some actual stuff to talk about. Look, we're probably going to announce Declan Rice and Urian Timber over the next couple of days. As I said at the beginning of the pod, what do you want us to do about that? There's literally, if there's anything to be said about those players that's left out there, it beats me. We scouted video. We scouted Timber. We scouted Rice twice. we did 3 Rice pods, 2 Timber pods. I mean, it's all out there. So now all that's left to do is, I guess, evaluate and critique the social media videos they put out. So we'll see how that goes. Let's leave it there. Tim's on Twitter at Stominator. Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, Pause. Clive, of course, will be back on a pod in the near future, as will all the other galaxy of stars and celebrity podcasters that make their appearance on the ArsenalVision podcast. No, all kidding aside, I was going to say we did Patreon pod with Clive on Friday, but actually put that out for everyone. So you probably heard it already. And we'll have him doing some office hours coming up soon on the Discord, and lots of fun new stuff that we're going to have for this season, including a new song. Our new opening song will be launching in the not too distant future. So that's one to stay tuned for. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying your summer, and sit tight, hold your breath. The Declan Rice and Urian Timber announcements are surely just around the corner as soon as I hit publish. We love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10 transfer. No.